Peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. Today we are continuing with Surah al-Baqarah, but we've gotten to sort of a transition point at the end of verse 39. So we're going to kind of do a summary and analysis for verses 21 through 39. We've already done a similar session for verses 1 through 20. So today's going to be more about analyzing the theme and the logic of this section, verses 21 to 39, that we've covered in the past couple of weeks. So just to give a brief overview for the surah, we've talked about how this surah is heavily focused upon guidance. After Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah 1, in which we pray for guidance to the upright path, then this surah starts, that is the book in which there is no doubt, a guidance for the wary. So the book introduces itself as a guidance, then it proceeds to describe who it guides. The believers, basically, with their qualities, those are upon guidance from their Lord, and those, they are the successful. Alaikum salam, welcome sister. Then it describes those who it does not guide, those who denied are not guided because they reject guidance, so it doesn't benefit them. Then it describes in some more detail those who say that they believe but they do not believe. So they claim to follow the guidance but basically do not do so. StreamYard link is in the chat if anyone wanted to join the stage. Then we get to verse 21, which is actually where we're starting today. O you people, serve your Lord who created you and those before you, that you may beware. So I'll just give my brief overview in terms of continuing with guidance and the overall theme of the surah. So in verse 21, this is effectively the guidance and the message of the book in one sentence. O people, serve your Lord who created you and those before you, that you may beware. Like for instance, in Surah 1, we prayed, guide us to the upright path. And we described how in other surahs, the upright path is described as worshiping God alone. Like for instance, worship God, my Lord and your Lord, this is an upright path. So if the upright path is worshiping God alone, when God is telling us to worship Him alone, this is what guidance embodies. This is like the guidance, so to speak. Then there's some discussion about the clear signs that make serving God alone the only rational guided path. Secondly, the outcome for those who follow this guidance versus those who are in doubt of it and who basically denies. There's a mention of the pledge of God, which also connects to serving Him alone, arguably. Then we get to verse 30 onwards, where it describes God's creation of Adam, creation of man, the gifts He endows him with, the sort of cognitive abilities that we talked about, his ability to name things, etc. Then his descent to earth, and very importantly, verse 38 and 39. We said descend from it collectively, so if there comes to you from me guidance, then whoever followed my guidance, then there is no fear upon them, and they do not grieve. And those who denied and belied our signs, those are the companions of the fire, they're in eternal. So this is like extremely potent for this surah. It defines that your outcome based upon whether you follow the guidance of God when it comes to you or not, universal for everyone, and the Quran is just one implementation of this universal truth. It's just another form of, or a specific form of the guidance coming to you, and your response to it will determine your destination. And it defines salvation, sort of, no fear upon them, and they will not grieve, purely in terms of whether or not you follow God's guidance when it comes to you. And then the surah later will proceed to define in other parallel ways. So there will be like, whoever submits his face to God, there's no fear upon them, and they will not grieve. In this case, whoever follows His guidance, there's no fear upon them, and they will not grieve. So this is an overview, kind of like a refresh, inshallah, and now we can go into some more details. Yeah, brother Roger, unfortunately, it's kind of inconvenient for your location. But alhamdulillah, at least we have the video available, so you can catch up if it's like too late for you. So we have the ChatGPT on the screen. Basically, as usual, I just ask it to analyze the section in the context of the surah's thematic analysis, which it had provided earlier, and it was completely in line with what I had separately concluded, that the whole basically theme of the surah is guidance, and it defines what the true guidance is, which is following Ibrahim's religion of submission, basically. So the true guidance is submission. In other words, the true guidance is worshiping God alone. And the surah teaches you how to do that and gives you examples of people who received that guidance but didn't follow it, or etc., etc. It kind of really analyzes that idea extremely thoroughly. Now in verses 21 through 39, it says that you have the universal enactment of guidance, whereas the opening describes how people respond to the book, or the guidance, you could say. 21 through 39 deal with why God alone must be served. How the same sign guides some and misguides others. How knowledge, obedience, arrogance, error, repentance, and guidance first operate in the Adam story, and how humanity's safety depends entirely upon following guidance that comes from God. The key passage it chooses in this section, which I certainly would agree with, is 38 to 39. So if there comes to you from me guidance, then whoever follows my guidance, there is no fear upon them, and they will not grieve. And those who denied and belied our signs, those are the companions of the fire. They're in it eternally. So this basically identifies it as the foundational covenant governing humanity's life on earth. Interesting way to put it, because I also had said like this is effectively the pledge of God, which it talks about earlier. So guidance comes from God. Humanity must follow it. Following it produces safety. Denial and belying produce punishment or fire. So we had earlier that phrase, opening the surah. That is the book in which there is no doubt, a guidance for the wary. Therefore, the book is the present enactment of God's primordial promise. If there comes to you from me guidance, the book is just that condition occurring currently. Interesting.
So can you say that 38, 39 is God's pledge? If you follow my guidance, then you shall be redeemed and rewarded.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because for instance, later there's an alternate sort of presented. So for instance, it cites the Jews who say like the fire will not touch us except for a number of days, and God says, أَتَّخَذْتُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَهْدًا فَلَنْ يُخْلِفَ اللَّهُ عَهْدَهُ أَمْ تَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ بَلَى مَنْ كَسَبَ سَيِّئَةً وَخَطَّتْ بِهِ خَطِيئَتُهُ فَأُولَئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أُولَئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَنَّةِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. They said, the fire will not touch us except number of days. God said, did you take with God a covenant, or like a pledge? Then God will never break his pledge. Or are you saying about God what you do not know? Yes, whoever earned sin and or an error and his sin encompassed him, basically, those will be the companions of the fire. They're in eternal. And whoever believed and worked righteousness, those are the companions of the garden. They're in eternal. So the pledge is this serving of God alone, if you will. They have an alternate pledge they present, like based upon which community they're a part of, salvation is guaranteed. So God questions them, like, where is this pledge coming from? And then presents the actual pledge that no, whoever does evil will go to the fire eternally, and whoever believes and works righteousness, which is another synonym basically for submitting to God, will go to the garden eternally. So that's his only pledge.
Even in verse 39, they will abide therein forever is also used. And then there is a counterexample presented in the following verse. But that's later, inshallah.
Yeah. So it opens verse 21.
Peace, brother. Are
Peace,
you
brother.
doing the summary?
Yeah, for verses 21 through 39. So it starts with verse 21. O you people, serve your Lord who created you and those before you, that you may beware. So this one's not random. Like I said before, this is actually the pledge, basically. This is the guidance. Walaikum salam, welcome sister. Okay, so basically the point is that I guess I don't really like how I don't think the ChatGPT summary went far enough here, but basically it says that, of course, we're commanded to worship our Lord who created us and those before us and the world around us and the sky above us, and sent down from the sky water, and brought forth from the ground then fruits from which we eat. So the point here is that serving God alone, exclusive service of God, is, it says, like the only truthful response to reality, but it's bigger than that. It's like you'd have to be blind to not serve God. You would have to be like, you truly have to be astray. It's just by definition the guided position to serve God, to realize like it's like a blindness to your surroundings to not serve God. And then, of course, it connects. This is a key point, kind of can be analyzed deeper, I think, but it connects serving God who created you to becoming wary. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Which earlier it had said the book is a guidance for the wary. So you have three concepts connected: guidance, wariness, and serving God, which are all parallel, as you can see, because it guides those who are wary, while those who serve God are the wary. So who does it guide? Those who serve God. It's like they're all parallel to each other. Any thoughts related so far?
Then the covenant appears first after that passage, that is verse 27. And then in the story of Adam, there's an explanation what the covenant is and the explanation of what being um, rebellious means or disobedient means. There's like no chance of it being random or compiled. It's tied so closely and so intricately together.
Yeah. So there's a few, like guidance is very strongly underlying everything. The more you look at it, the clearer it becomes. So number one, like I said, serving God alone, that you may be wary. The book introduces itself as a guidance for the wary. Then if you're in doubt of what we sent down upon our servant, well, it also introduces itself as the book in which there is no doubt, a guidance for the wary. So in this case, you're doubting that in which there is no doubt, or you're doubting the guidance, which is itself just astrayness. So if you do not, then beware of the fire.
The fire is also an explanation on the loss or the losers. In verse 20, what is their loss of the reward? And moreover, there is the punishment that makes them losers.
It also makes an interesting point that probably has merit, which is that of all attributes, God chose here servant. If you're in doubt of what we brought down upon our servant, because connecting to the probably the main point, which is that the main message, the guidance is to serve God, and this is somehow what people are doubting.
In the story of Adam, we can see how a difference is made between being defiantly disobedient and, well, just disobedient or accidentally disobedient. There's pretty much an elaboration on every word in the following verses.
So in this example, the famous verse about the mosquito, God is not shy to strike in likeness of a mosquito or what is above it. As for those who believe, they know it's the truth from their Lord. And as for those who denied, they say, what did God wish by this as a likeness? He strays with it many and guides with it many, and he does not stray with it except the defiant. So those who believed, it makes a nice table here. They say it's the truth from their Lord. Those who denied say, what did God intend by this? So the believers receive the sign through trust, whereas the deniers place themselves above the sign as judges. This, for me, is pretty significant because they later, there's a lot of sort of discussion where it's like placing God's guidance above you or placing yourself above God's guidance. So basically, the believers, they place God's guidance above themselves. It's the truth from their Lord. They seek whatever God wishes to teach them by the sign. Whereas those who denied place themselves above the guidance and say, like, what does this mean? What does God intend by this? So they're judging it by their own standards. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Can you hear me?
Yes.
SubhanAllah, I was bitten quite a bit by mosquitoes today and these past few days, and I was thinking a lot about mosquitoes. And then this verse comes up. I'm a little bit unclear as to what's on the screen regarding AI, but I did think about this exact verse today, of course, as it relates to my bites. And one thing I thought is that nobody likes a bloodsucker. I apologize. I'm hearing myself in the background, so okay, sorry. So basically, like based off the way that you're positing this, the interpretation of the sign as it regards to someone not believing in the hereafter or believing in the hereafter, where would you place, for example, reflecting on the sign and reflecting on it, for example, as it might relate to the hereafter? For example, and again, sorry if that this is convoluted, but what I'm thinking, for example, the thing that I thought is that nobody likes a bloodsucker. It's like how humans are to their Lord. Sometimes they may just want to take and take and take and have no gratitude to God, no sense of duty, they never think that they will be held to account, and at an instant that may be paralleled with the mosquito. We don't like it when it takes our blood, and then we feel a bit uncomfortable with that, etc. I don't know if but if the example would stand, and or if this is the right way to deal with the verse. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that. Thank you for your patience.
No worries. But honestly, I didn't quite get the question. Could you rephrase slightly?
So the reflection was that mosquitoes pose a nuisance to us. We don't like, for example, there's that verse that talks about if the fly was to take something from them, they would not be able to get it back. The mosquito is a tiny, tiny creature that is taking our blood in tiny amounts to feed its children. And when it does so, it usually causes itching, discomfort, annoyance, etc. And that kind of sense of just like taking something from us, we don't like it, even if it's a tiny amount of blood. And of course, we can never take anything from God without his, it's the example doesn't pan on in that respect, which is my first question is, do you think this is a fair analogy to make? And then the analogy itself was that we don't like how it feels when a mosquito takes our blood, but yet many of us humans are willing to take from God without any responsibility. And then the second question was in regards to the AI breakdown that you did and the implications of trying to think of analogies with this verse, whether the verse would encourage us to do so or discourage us to do so, if that's clear, inshallah.
Okay, I'll try. It's kind of a long question, but number one, it was like, yeah, the sort of like symbolism behind the mosquito. Like, what is the sign? Because actually, God does not describe what the point of the mosquito was at all in the verse. He just says he's not afraid to strike an example of a mosquito or what is above it. And a mosquito is like a tiny insect. So pretty much the smallest one that people tend, or one of the smallest ones you could say people interact with on a daily basis. And so you were basically saying like one of the examples that's built into a mosquito is that of a parasite. So, and how you don't like it when even a tiny creature is doing nothing for you. Even it's not even harming you per se, except by God's permission. So, but you still, nobody likes them. So how would you, as you're even tinier to God, how would God like you if you are doing nothing to serve him? I think that's built in, like that's a fair observation. Secondly, I think there's more though.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
You probably may have wanted to say this, but mosquitoes, ironically, are one of the most deadly animals to humans. So that goes a month. The smallest animal that seems weak is actually. Oh, cringe! I apologize.
Huh? Yeah. Due to malaria, I assume. That one speaks to a different truth, which is like what is insignificant to you could be very significant, which is part of what the verse is saying. Like a person would think that what could a mosquito like be of significance, but it can actually end your life. It's revealing sort of disconnect between what people see as important or dangerous and what actually is, which in this case, the real danger is denying God's signs. And there's other meanings, I think, built in, like, for example, just the fact that everything has a symbolism behind it. Everything has a lesson in it. So God has not just created randomly, or not even just created a system that purely works, but also a system that has meaning behind it. Even on the smallest level, there's lessons. There's lessons in studying the microscopic world, etc., etc. And then the second question was, could you remind me the second question?
I guess maybe that one would be best addressed. I think you had a chart or a T chart, which was dividing like good takes of this verse versus bad takes. Maybe just explain that.
Oh, yeah, now I remember. You were asking basically like, where does that leave pondering on science? if those who denied said, like, what did God intend by this? Here, the point was that what did God intend by this was not a neutral inquiry. It's them placing their judgment above God's guidance. So they're subjecting what did God judge by this? Intend by this. They're the judge, basically. And they're belittling it beneath themselves. Those who believe are placing it above themselves as guidance. So they are saying it's the truth from their Lord. Even if they don't understand it, they place it above themselves, therefore are guided by it. They subject themselves to the guidance versus subjecting God's guidance beneath oneself.
And
We'll
isn't
get
it
this
ironic?
theme.
Sorry.
Sorry. Never mind.
No, I want to hear what you have to say. I'll just say really quickly, like the doesn't the verse say ma fawqaha?
Right.
Which is interesting that you phrase this as a believer's place place themselves under it, or like basically the sign is above it, but the mosquito is smaller, and yet it doesn't matter. It's the example that God strikes. You are like the concept of submission or prostration, or that God is the highest. So I think all of these things may have some relevance here in this symbolism.
Actually, what you said is, just to add a small comment, is like very significant, because they place, therefore, you would say, like, they place the smallest guidance, the smallest lesson from God above themselves. Whereas those who denied, like, the smallest lesson is like way beneath them. Like, what? A mosquito? Like, what's a mosquito going to teach us?
There's something else. What Yetta was saying, and in that vein, in that direction, the mosquito, or what is above it, and placing guidance above themselves or above their own desires, and Iblis placing himself, seeking greatness, placing himself over Adam, and final in the final outcome of that is how they were kicked down, sent down as enemies to each other. And then a mosquito itself, the word for a mosquito, ba'ud, and then each other is the same root, basically, ba'dakum ba'd. So that is something that is in portions, in sections, perhaps part of you to part of that. The mosquito can be, and it's a standard word for a mosquito. It's not like that it's some literary expression. It's a standard word for a mosquito or a gnat. It's a pincher who takes something. Could be pulls the blanket on themselves kind of thing, or could refer to seeking greatness on behalf of Iblis in this case. And generally, this topic of whatever is above and what the outcome of it is, it continues on the following verses and other sections.
And the verse ends like this verse about the mosquito. It ends with saying, and he does not stray with it except the defiant, then it proceeds, who unravel the pledge of God after its binding, and cut what God commanded to be connected, and corrupt in the earth, those are the losers. So here basically it defines the opposite of guidance. He astrays with it whom he wills. So he does not stray except the defiant. And then the defiant are those who don't uphold the pledge of God. In other words, don't uphold serving God alone. They cut what God commanded to be connected, such as servitude to Him, sacrifice to Him, whatever the case. Corrupt in the earth, and those are the losers. And losers also is like to be lost. Thus, also basically opposite to guidance. It says their intellectual rejection of the example is the expression of a prior moral disorder. So it's not intellectual basically, it's rather coming from defiance, the refusal to basically, the desire to not serve. And then how can you deny God while you are dead? Then He gave you life. Then He causes you to die. Then He gives you life. Then to Him you are returned. So denial is incoherent. Kind of reminds me of how like it talks about doubting the book in which there is no doubt. So doubting is incoherent. Rejecting guidance similarly results in you not being guided, so it's also incoherent. Similarly here, like how can you deny God when basically He created you and you're going back to Him? So you're refusing someone who's inevitable. Any other thoughts before the Adam section?
Once again, the creation and how God raises Himself, places Himself, establishes upon the throne. It's also the ultimate raise, the ultimate elevation. So, speaking of what is above what, there's already an answer to it.
Yeah, and it also seems to like convey the grandeur of like denial of God, both on your personal basis of the one who gave you life and causes your death, so it's mortally important to you. Secondly, He brings you back just as He created you the first time, so you your judgment also is to him, and you can't escape him. So the importance is like existential, mortally, and beyond important to you to follow the guidance. Secondly, he created for you whatever's in the earth and leveled the sky above you in 7 heavens, so even beyond your comprehension. So his creation is like absolutely grand beyond your comprehension. So that's the grandeur of the guidance and denying the guidance. It's not just a niche thing, guidance somewhere that you're denying and you can still live a fruitful life without it. It's like, no, it's like an existential importance to you, and its grandeur is beyond your comprehension. Finally, I would maybe add that there's also the connection in verse 27. Those who unravel the pledge of God after its binding and cut what God commanded to be connected and corrupt in the earth. So those who deny God's guidance, dismiss, for instance, the example of the mosquito or whatever sign, which the guidance comes in the form of signs, arguably, it's not just neutral. They literally results in the corruption of the earth. Because without them knowing why they're on earth, of course they're going to misapply. So, so they're not going to follow God's guidance or God's order, God's rules, which are what makes the earth proper, if you will. Rather, they're just going to follow whatever nonsense aligns with their desires, and that will result in corruption. So any final thoughts connecting here? We'll have to do a second part, I think, because we're running out of time. Okay, if not, we'll conclude, and inshallah, we'll resume in 2 days with a second part of analysis, God willing. So peace to everyone. Thank you for joining. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much. Till next time, inshallah. Salam.